Today was Charter School Advocacy Day in Albany, and this year advocates are seeking charter schools to be allowed to provide pre-kindergarten education. Joining me now to explain more is the head of the New York State Charter Schools Association, Bill Phillips. It is good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
I find this fascinating. So the governor had this Education Reform Commission, right? And they said universal pre-K is great. All the studies indicate that all kids do better if they go early, right? And the governor has this competitive program, and he wants there to be pre-K, and more schools should do it, except not charters.
These are all good points. Let's go through them a little bit. So we agree with the governor that pre-K works. We agree with the governor that you should target high needs districts. Charter schools, over 90% of our schools are in high needs districts. The piece about the competitive grants, we even agree with that. I suspect if you were to go through press releases for the last 3 years, we're probably one of the few organizations that have said competitive grants actually
most people
make
hate
sense.
them.
Right. We actually think they make sense. The other thing about it is I mentioned that there's 90% of our schools are in those districts. We were actually doing a very good job in those districts. If you look at our performance of our elementary and our middle schools, over 75% of our schools exceed the district average in both English and math.
So have you asked the administration why it is that charters are exempt?
We did ask to be included, and that did not occur. We quite honestly have not been given an answer as to why, and so you'd have to ask them, obviously.
Okay, so what do you think it might be, though? I mean, charter schools are inherently a little I don't want to say controversial, but the unions obviously have mixed feelings about them. But they are sort of they're public. They're publicly funded, right?
Yes.
But they're outside. They exist outside many of the traditional rules that govern public schools.
Sure, right. Look, a couple things. I think if you read the commission's report, it's clear there was a discussion about whether or not charter schools should be eligible. And it's kind of a fascinating thing. There's a footnote that explains why charter schools might make a good addition. Obviously, it's a shame that it didn't make it to the regular text. We might have fared better. But I saw this morning, it was on a blog, that one of the commission members, Sarah Mead, who is a pre-K expert, had actually thought that it made sense to include charters in the mix. And actually, in that blog, I also noticed that the unions were already saying that they were skeptical that we should be included. So I think you're making fair points.
I just wonder, I mean, I'm surprised a little bit because, it's the same pool of kids. I mean, I know that there's a lot of arguments that, charters take the best kids and leave public schools with kids who have higher needs, and so they cherry pick and it's difficult, and that's why they get better test scores or whatever it is that they might argue. But it's still kids who would benefit from pre-K, regardless of whether or not they're testing higher.
Sure, right. And as you can imagine, I have a different opinion about the issues.
I'm sure you do. Do you have any idea how much it would cost? I mean, this is...
All we're asking is to be eligible for the grant pool as the...
So you're not asking for the pool to be expanded
to
accommodate
not at all.
you?
Remember, it's a $25 million pool, and we would actually just like to compete for that pool just like any other school.
What else is there in the budget that you guys are seeking?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I think we need to put this in context. The governor's budget, as it relates to funding, we're level funded, and we think that's actually fair, and we think it's fair because it's still a tough economy, and we'll continue to do the best we can with that. We're still not close to equal as it relates to what districts receive versus what charters receive, and I think that's actually part of the frustration for us, that this issue about having access to pre-K was, it's an equity issue to us. And so I think that's where you see some of the frustration.
Well, we hear some of the same frustration experienced by the parochial schools, but they are actually funded privately. So
Correct.
It's a little bit of a different argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else about, for example, the governors, in also the Reform Commission, there were things like the bar exam for teachers and some of these other proposals. Are you on board with all of those?
Well, we'd have to go through each one of them. I think it's always important to remember that the charter schools, we have a different accountability model. A lot of the stuff you saw in that report talked about what I would call input-based accountability, and what I mean by that is, okay, so you have a bar exam for your teachers. For us, remember, our issue is we're supposed to be less regulated, and if we don't do our job, we're supposed to be closed. So quite honestly, our view is let us make our promises in the charter. We'll perform at a level that I've described, which has actually been quite high. And if we don't do our job, close our schools. So a lot of this other stuff I think is internal, and I understand why district schools need to do that. Actually, when I gave my testimony to the commission, I actually suggested that there were some things that they might want to copy, and I actually thought, you have a lot of districts that want to get or have access to mandate relief, and quite frankly, I thought if there was some way to set up that school districts would give their families choice if their ideas didn't work, we thought quite honestly they ought to be eligible for the same kind of mandate relief.
What does that mean? I don't understand what that means. Give the families choice. How does that work?
You have school districts that will come to you that will actually say, here's all the things that really make it hard for us to do our job.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, the charter schools don't have to do those things. That's the front end of the process. The back end of the process is there's two ways that charter schools are held accountable differently. The first is parents choose. If parents don't like what we offer, the charter school doesn't get paid, and if the charter school doesn't attract enough parents, it cannot exist. That's obviously something that a school district doesn't deal with. The other thing is if a charter school does not perform, like literally scores at a level that well below what we promised, it's closed. So I think if you go back to the commission, I think there should be more freedom for district schools. I just also think that you should look at ways to. Just
very quickly, forgive me because we're out of time. The teacher evaluation battle. Do you guys weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, we do. Of course, I cannot give you an easy answer here. The law does not apply to charter schools. The primary reason it does not apply to charter schools is that we're held to, if our schools close, everybody loses their job. The only distinction there is if any of our schools had a choice whether or not to take the Race to the Top money, any school that took the money obviously had to take the rules. And then in those cases, those schools are.
But none of those schools failed to make the deadline. That agreed.
Yeah, cool. No, we're fine. Right.
Right. Okay. So we'll follow this issue because it really is a little curious and also very interesting. So I want to thank you very much, Bill, for bringing it to our attention.
Thanks again for having me.
Thanks very much.